Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the Developers and Podcast, where we talk about everything in the games industry, but from the eyes of two indie devs. My name is Sivash, aka Rainy, and joining is Sydney, aka Fam. Today, on another episode of How to Indie, we are going to be talking about the importance of characters, or well-written characters, or just interesting characters in general, in games. Yeah. This is kind of Sydney's bread and butter, but we were just talking about our experiences with interesting characters in games, especially the ones that we didn't expect to have interesting characters. And what's funny is that we only found a handful of genres or types of games where a character isn't important or an interesting character isn't important. And even that was a struggle because the definition of what is a character is quite large, actually.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to do it, we've kind of been doing this this pre-production series, right, of how to do pre-prod for your game, and we've talked about all the boring stuff. We talked about how to make tools and how to choose your engine and contracts and whatever, but we kind of want to get in the meat of actually planning the video game. And we've talked about what those steps look like. We talked about environment and how important that is to choose, and the things that you need to choose very, very early on, and the things you need to develop very early on. And I think along with choosing the setting for your game, one of the most important things you need to create as early as possible is who are your characters going to be. And it seems like something that you would do during production, but it's not. It's something that takes so much more time and effort, I think, than a lot of people realize.
Yeah.
And not only how important it is to do as soon as possible, but just how important characters are to literally the entire game and how much they inform the entire game. So we want to talk about them. So what we want to start with is, what is a character? Because like Rainy said, that's a pretty broad definition. So the first thing we're going to kind of point out is, what are some video games that do really well that have no characters at all?
Yeah.
Because as far as we could tell, there aren't a lot.
No.
And if you're watching and you can think of any, after we've had this whole thing about what characters are, if you can think of any more video games that you've played that have no characters in them, please let us know.
Please let us know.
Because we're curious. We've been talking about this for a while and we couldn't come up with very many. So, and we're kind of doing genres, really. I think the most obvious one is those simulation games.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or at least where the characters don't matter and can be overlooked.
Yeah, because when I was thinking about it, I was just looking at my Steam library, and the only one I could come across was like Farming Sim, or Euro Truck Sim, or American Truck Sim, or Microsoft Flight Simulator. So those were the type of games that genuinely don't have a character. Now, you could potentially count the vehicle in those games as a character.
Euro Truck Sim, yeah.
I mean, with Flight Sim 2, maybe, because they all act differently and you need to have to like control them and all that stuff. But that would be a bit of a stretch, because we do have games where like a vehicle or a building or a world is a character of its own, but it has a lot more in it, I suppose, rather than just...
And I think you said Farm Simulator is a really interesting example. Because Farming Simulator, if you've ever played it, does have characters in it.
Yeah.
You have the different people that you can take jobs for, you have, but in those instances and in sim games, the characters are more set dressing than anything else. You don't really care about them. You don't really think about them in any way. They don't have any kind of personality that you interact with. They all have like even the same general, like all of the job requests in Farming Simulator are like worded the same. So that you don't feel like they're not written to reflect the type of person who's asking for them.
Yeah.
They're not written for like, if it's an old lady, it's not like, oh, I'm too old to do this, I need you to, or like, my husband broke his back, I need you to, there's nothing like that.
Yeah.
It's just, hey, come plow my fields or whatever.
Yeah.
So while there are characters, they don't really impact anything. It's just there for, the closest I would say for Farming Simulator in terms of characters I would actually say is maybe the different fields.
Fields, I was just going to say, because those are the only area where you can kind of see different characteristics that you might need to consider. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and so that's, I think sim games, you know,
like, yeah, when you accept a job.
Power Wash Simulator, I don't think really.
Yeah.
And any of those games that you see where you're running a restaurant or you're running a supermarket or you're running a gas station or a video game, so whatever those that simulation game is, the characters who come in don't really reflect.
Now, we did talk about tycoons,
anything.
Which you mentioned
different ball game.
Yeah, you mentioned that in Roller Coaster Tycoon, the people who do come visit the park are a lot more of a character because they have personalities, they have preferences, they have stuff that they think about, there's stuff that they say. Yeah. I mean, in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, you can add custom families, even. Yeah. That they come and visit.
I never liked 3. I played 2 more than anything.
Yeah.
But even in 2, you know, and when they're just individuals, they wear different colors of shirt, and you can follow the one person and they get a little pop out, and you can watch all the things that they're doing and the things that they're interacting with. And you can even kick them out of your park if you don't like them. So like it gives you an opportunity to develop a relationship with these little characters. You can rename them if you want to.
Yeah.
In Roller Coaster 2. So I don't think it's all simulation games, but I think that very particular type that's become very popular recently, that all have very similar art style, I think those, for the most part, I would argue, don't really have any characters. I think puzzle games, too.
Yeah.
But even that is becoming a little less true. If you look at something like Unpacking.
Yeah.
Unpacking, if you've never played it, is a master class of character development without writing any story.
It's crazy.
For the player to interact with. It is, if you've never played it and you're interested in character development and how to do it right, go play it. It's like, it's a cheap game. Go play it. It's so worth it. And it's so fascinating. But without ruining it for you, there's nothing that tells you the story. There's nothing that explains to you any of the characters. But through unpacking their belongings, you learn who these people are and what their trajectory through life looks like. And it's fascinating. I saw a meme the other day. It was you've played Unpacking, right?
I actually haven't, no.
Oh, okay. If you know, you know. But it was a meme, and it was a very particular person's house. And if you've played it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And the caption of it was like, I've never hated a character so much in my life. And you'd have to play it to really understand it. And when you'll get to it, you'll be like,
is that the coffee maker meme?
I understand why we all hate this guy. No. It's a particular... Something? A little bit, a little bit, So the trajectory, basically the way the game works, is you're following one person through their life and all the places that they move to. So you see the different people's houses that she moves into, and it's so well done. Anyway, but a game like that arguably has no characters, still has characters that are so important. And it ends up becoming the items in their life and the characters that you don't see. So I would say most puzzle games, but at the same time, it's not all puzzle games because it depends how much narrative you put into it. Same thing with, I think, racing games. Sometimes there's a narrative that's put in and sometimes there isn't. And the better ones always have the narrative added on.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at some of the older Need for Speed games, if you grew up with them, you know, some of the best ones are the ones that have a little bit of a storyline and have the different characters. Like they portray them as bosses, the different characters, and each like control a different area of the city, and then you race them, and then you get that area and stuff like that. So and
it makes for a better gaming experience.
Yeah, because even some of the most unexpected ones, have narratives.
I feel like with video games, what we often forget is that what makes video games so good for people is you're getting that interaction with something that you can connect with as a human. And that's why the characters are so important. And it doesn't matter if the characters are even people or not.
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
matters is how you connect with it and what is it that keeps bringing you back to it. There was a game that I played as a kid at school. We had like computer labs or whatever, and I couldn't remember anything about this game. And I'd been looking for it for years, and I still remember the name of it, but I had been talking to Kevin about it, and we finally did some deep research, and the only thing I could remember about it was robot clowns. All I could remember. And I remember there were like math elements, but there were also like investigation elements, and I just had like this visual in my head. And it was the characters that stuck with me. It wasn't what I learned from it as a kid. It was the characters that I like. Same thing, we had a series of games here in the US called Jumpstart.
Yeah.
Jumpstart first grade, second grade, third grade. And you would play, the idea was you'd play them the summer before you start that grade level. So the summer between second and third grade, you do play Jumpstart third grade to get you kind of jump started on that next school year. And everybody who's ever played Jumpstart second grade remembers the frog. It's the character that you connect with. The main character in the third one was a robot, and you just like, they stick in your head, you know?
What was
and
the
it's
game
something
then
that you can,
for you?
Which one? Jumpstart second or third grade?
Was that
or the robot clown game?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking? No, I can't remember. Kevin might remember it. It was what we ended up. It wasn't robot clowns. It was robots, and one of them was a clown, which is the one that I remembered.
Okay.
And it was an investigative game, so you'd have to find clues around.
Yeah, because I had an edutainment as well game that I played growing up, and I loved it. It was Putt Putt. I don't know how you say it. He's like a purple car. Yeah, it was made by Humongous Entertainment. I don't think they're a thing anymore. But they used to make edutainment stuff at point-and-click games, and man, that stuck with me. I loved it when I grew up with it.
But even something like, if we want to go back to edutainment and the stuff that stuck with us, something like Oregon Trail.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
The character was your little cart. It was it was your cart and your oxen. And you connected with that. And it was the characters that you created. You put in your friends' names and stuff. And, I wouldn't go as far as to say, like, the things that you would die of are characters. But at the same time, they
kind of were. Because that's the one that people meme the most.
It's
like,
what you
was it dysentery?
How would you say
dysentery.
That?
Dysentery, yeah. What is dysentery?
So,
I don't know what dysentery is still.
It's gross. That's all you need to know.
Okay.
It's a gastrointestinal disease. That's disgusting.
Oh, it's a disease. That's all you need to say.
Yeah, it's a disease.
But I mean, the characters can even be. I mean, we can bring this up later if you want to. But we were just talking about RimWorld and how characters don't even have to be written by someone else. It can be done in a way that it can develop through the course of a game.
Yeah. And I haven't played that one, but I do want to talk about it later. But kind of talking about the characters that we don't expect to be characters, when we were making a list of like, what are games that don't have characters versus games that do? And originally I put Tetris on the list. And then I realized, no, Tetris has characters.
I suppose
the characters are the different shapes that you use. Because you're so intimately familiar with what all of them are. And anybody who's ever expanded on the Tetris game has changed the shapes. And you get new characters.
New characters, yeah.
So I ended up moving that. I was like, no, this one does have characters. I think another one we don't really think about that you had mentioned was Among Us, which arguably doesn't really have characters, but at the same time, it does. It's your little people. And even though it represents you and your friends, your crewmates and the little hats that they can wear and your ability to customize and personalize them and your little pets that can follow you around and even the ways that they die and kill each other have become characters to the game that are very easily recognizable, that people love. And, if you want to go back to games like, I mean, we're talking OG video game characters, we're talking about Mario, right? And I don't think the people who made Mario realized what they were getting into.
No, probably. I would assume not.
It was, we need to make a platformer, but they did just enough work and world development that it stuck with people and that they could continue to development on it over time. So I think what we're trying to get to with all of this is, you know, I talk to people about making video games all the time at conventions or just talking to people, new people I meet. We went to a concert this past Friday and we were waiting for the concert to start and we were talking to a nice couple that was sitting next to us. And we started talking about anime and stuff, and she asked us at what point what we do, and I told her I make video games. The entire conversation turned into her asking me for advice for her son who wants to make video games one day. And it was great, and I loved every minute of it, but it happens a lot where I'm like talking to people about making games. And the thing that I really want to drive home is every time I talk to these people who are like, oh, I'm developing a shooter game, or I'm developing a game of this, or it's always mechanics first. Right?
Yeah.
It can't be. It has to be characters first. It has to be, because that's the thing that people are going to stick to and remember.
Yeah.
And it's going to have people come back for more.
I mean, yeah, definitely characters are the thing that you will remember the most. Like, if you think about some of the most influential games in your life, for me, like something like Mass Effect, I immediately think about the characters. Or something like Baldur's Gate or Metroid. You just immediately, it's just, I mean, it's always characters, right?
Legend of Zelda.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why something like Super Smash Bros. Exists, is because of the love for these characters. That just create the game, yeah.
Even Star Fox.
Yeah, oh, for sure, Star Fox, yeah.
Did not, there was no Fox in the beginning. You know, it was the plane was the character. And so, yeah, I think, you know, can you do it where the characters become second fiddle? Yeah. But arguably, they have to be first. If you want your game to be successful, you need to create a game that people can connect with.
And it's a really good little cheat code, honestly. Just make very good characters that people can. I mean, even something like what's that game? That's what's like a game show, that the courses that you would go through with other online players. It kind of came around the same time as Among Us.
Salem. Town of Salem and Werewolf, and talk about that game?
No, I'm not talking about that game. No. It was like a game show. Like a TV show, and then you would go through different courses, and then people would get
like the Jackbox games that we played.
No, like, do you know what Takeshi's Castle is, or Total Wipeout? No, too British.
No, too British.
Yeah, but there was a game, I can't think of it right now. Hang on.
But it did remind me of Jackbox, and the Jackbox games. Even the Jackbox games have characters. It's the announcers.
Yeah.
That have personality, and, you know, you comment on them as you're playing. And if we talk about the Jackbox games, like, everybody can think of, you can hear the narrators in your head of the ones that you played the most. You know what I mean? So, you know, and there's the ones that we all know, like we were saying, there's Metroid, there's Castlevania, there's
Fall Guys. Sorry, Fall Guys.
Oh, Fall Guys.
Yeah, I mean, even that game with the design of the characters and how you customize them is very close to the crewmates, and then, you know, you can just build a franchise on that design, honestly, at that point.
And they are.
And they
were. Yeah. We also, one of the ones that we also want to talk about, like, beloved characters, kind of came out of left field. And I think the best example is Portal. We were talking about. Portal is not a game about characters. It's a puzzle game.
Yeah.
It's just get through the puzzles.
Well, it tricks you.
And get to the end.
It makes you think it's a puzzle game. But it's not really. It's a narrative game. It's just a pure story game.
But mechanic-wise,
yeah.
If you muted the game,
yes,
right, you could play Portal muted and never know that there's a story.
Yeah, true. Portal 1, yeah.
But would you want to keep playing it?
Probably not, no. Because, you know,
it's the story that makes you want to keep coming back and figuring out what's happening. It's that connection with the player.
I mean, I just thought of another good game that has a similar sort of approach, and it's Five Nights at Freddy's, the original.
Okay, never played it, so you have to tell me.
So Five Nights at Freddy's is it kind of invented a bit of a genre. It's a game. It's a management game at its core. It's a management horror game. You're a security. Yeah, you're a security officer at a restaurant with animatronics that are haunted.
So it's your like job, Chuck E. Cheese, right?
It's exactly based on kind of inspired by Chuck E. Cheese. At night, you're looking through the camera.
That's actually a really great idea for a game.
Yeah, genius.
Now I think about it, honestly. That's genius.
Yeah. You have this monitor thing that you can toggle between different cameras and make sure you look through and nothing crazy happens. As you're toggling through different cameras, the animatronics disappear. They start going into different rooms. And then you have limited power, so you can't just keep an eye on the monitor. And you can close the doors on the sides too, which uses power as well. So if you run out of power, you will die. So you want to make sure that if the animatronics show up, you close the door so they can't come in and they go back. And the programming gets restarts and they go around. But that's a loop, right? It's a 5 nights.
That's really clever.
Yeah, you got to try it. I know it's scary, but
absolutely not. Not a million years, but it's very clever.
It's 5 nights, obviously, and each night it gets harder and harder. But the thing that really sold that game, got everybody absolutely crazy over that game back in 2016. I think it was 2016. Where the characters and the lore, the hidden lore, people started reading the little signs that were on the walls and brightening the screen and stuff and finding little tiny pieces of lore here and there, and then they just kind of came up with theories of like what the story is about. And then funnily enough, the actual creator of the game took a lot of those theories and developed the story based off of them. So it was kind of this reverbing kind of process that happened. But that's the thing. I mean, it was a very simple game, very simple mechanic, but what kept you playing was trying to figure out what happened here. Like, what's the story? What's the lore?
I think a similar game would be, not similar, but in that it's not about characters in the way you think it is, would be Stray.
Oh, right, yeah.
Because anybody who bought that game's like, I want to be a cat. you know? Yeah. And you played all of it. I didn't, because I did not like what happens to the character in the first couple minutes. I was grumpy about my cat falling down a cliff. Yeah. But for somebody who goes into it just thinking, I'm going to play as a cat, that's not what keeps you going. Mm-hmm. Right? It's how the cat interacts with the world and the characters
the actual people in it and stuff. Very interesting. Very, very interesting lore that it had. And the character designs and and
arguably that's why it was a success. Flip side, you have a game like Little Kitty Big City, which arguably is the same game. You play a cat and you go through the city and you get into hijinks and stuff. Now, I'm not saying Little Kitty Big City was not an excellent game. It is. But they're two very different games. Because one has an in-depth linear narrative and one of them is a sandbox.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the linear one was way more well received because it had an interesting story.
Well, it sticks with you more so than anything. Yeah. There are games that you go to just as a little time waster and you don't think about it much. But the games that you like, you love the characters, you retweet fan arts of them, or people even create fan arts of them. Those are the ones that stick with you and kind of spark a conversation. And so that I think is why if you have the opportunity for it as an indie dev, you got to do it.
So the question then is, how much time do we have left?
We got about 20 minutes.
So the question is, how do you make a good character? Because it's not necessarily all about writing. Writing is part of it, but doesn't have to be. I have over here next to me, I have the art book from Cuphead.
Oh, yeah.
Which was, again, a game that's all about the characters.
Yeah.
But it didn't set out to be that. It set out to be, the kind of linear fighting game that it is. But the characters are what made people love it so much. And the art book is a breakdown of how every single character was designed. From sketches to animation styles to what makes them individual. And if you want to make good characters, the first step is you have to put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah.
And you have to be creative. You have to be a creative person if you're going to make characters. If you're a very technical-minded, technical-oriented game developer, you'll do okay. but you need a creative person on your team who can create those characters for you, because that's what's going to, keep bringing people back. My screen is really bright and it's reflecting. So it's going to be different for everybody. The only thing I can really speak to is how we did the characters for SunnySide. And there's a lot to it. I mean, the first thing that I would say, and kind of the cheat sheet way of doing it, is you need a spreadsheet to keep track of everybody. And we broke it down into the demographics that were important to us for our characters. You don't necessarily have to do it that way. Let's say, let's look at some of these games we talked about and how we would put them on a spreadsheet. You've got the shapes from Tetris.
Yeah.
Right? Shape, color.
Yeah.
That's all it really goes. And how you can flip it, really. Yeah. And then you've got Among Us. It's just color options, hat options, and killing animations, really. And how those would all kind of go together. And the reason the spreadsheet is important for a game like Tetris, a game like Among Us, you don't want to have two that have the same shape or color, right? Because it would be confusing to the player. So if you're talking Tetris, you want the colors of the shapes to all be different and unique.
Yeah.
And to mean something. Looking at something like Mario, a little bit more complicated. You have character names, male or female, height, signature colors, outfits. These are the things that people are going to use to not only differentiate the character, but to set them apart from each other. So you're not using the same signature colors.
I guess the common ancestor of all of these characters as well to keep in mind, and it's something that gets brought up a lot when you talk about characters in general, is the silhouette as well, which is very important. Yeah. I mean, generally part of the design, and probably, and if you're having a difficult time trying to figure out a silhouette of a character, just think about what is the most kind of stand out thing about the character when you look at it from afar away. Is it really wide? Is it really large? Is it really tall? Is it really small? And those are all going to kind of affect the perception of the player.
What you really want, and the reason that the spreadsheet is important, is because you want to look at what are these things that set all the characters apart from each other. So for instance, if we're talking about Mario, it's the silhouette, it's the height, size, and shape of the character, and their signature colors. I can tell you, I can say purple, and you can tell me what signature color that is for a Mario World character.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean? Green, pink, yellow, and just the colors. Immediately. Exactly. So, and I would say color is actually probably the most important thing. More so than silhouette is color. Because you want to be able to associate colors with the different characters. Look at Among Us, Tetris. If you even one of the examples that you gave earlier was playing SimCity and all the different advisors. Yeah. You ever notice they have different colors assigned to them?
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
So that you can make those quick connections with things. So,
recognizability or even as well, very much so.
Yeah, even if we're talking about something that's more abstract, like unpacking, all of the different items in each world or in each map, the items that travel have very distinct colors if you pay attention, because it makes them stand out to you. I think one of them's like a red robot figure or something. And so you spot it as it moves and as it, changes places and stuff. So color is really important. We did it for SunnySide. It came later when we were actually doing the character design. But what we were doing is we were putting characters, we had a whole chart that was all the characters standing next to each other, and what are their signature colors. And unfortunately, we had some overlap because there's a lot of characters. So it became color combinations and things that, so for instance, Lucy, hers ended up being yellow. Gabe's ended up being blue.
Yeah. Xander's red.
Xander is red. Yeah. The Hina and Sebastian Nakamura, theirs ended up being green. It was their hair. So you want to have these colors that people can connect with. So in terms of making story, you need to figure out what are the general demographics that you want to use to differentiate all these people from each other, not just to make sure that you can remember them, but also make sure they don't overlap, people don't get confused. And also just to kind of make sure that you're getting some kind of variation in there. So for SunnySide, it was names. Ages was an important demographic for us because of the dating system. We wanted to make sure we had a nice, long, wide spread of ages rather than everybody just being in their 20s or 30s. So that's why we have characters from 18 to 51 and then a whole bunch of stuff in between, because we put the effort into tracking all of that stuff when we were designing the characters. Yeah. And it changed a few times too to make it make more sense. We also had height, we had weight, we had gender expression, we had sexuality, we had even eye and hair color was something that we put on the chart. We also had like hobbies and
I mean your signature one, what's the MBTI? Is that what it's called?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Don't forget about the most important part.
I forgot. Everybody got a Myers-Briggs personality type, and we made sure there was no overlap, so that you've got very different personality types for all the different people you're interacting with.
That's a very good cheat as well, to immediately try to figure out how a character would react to a scenario.
I had totally forgotten about that, but you're right. If you want,
let's talk about that.
If you want a cheat sheet for making quick narrative-driven characters, name generators, just type, words that start with A, or names that start with A, or names that start with B, and you can even do it by like ethnicity types. So if you want something that's a little bit more Middle Eastern sounding, or something that's more Japanese sounding, or whatever, you can put that into name generators, put in the first letter, and it gives you lists of names. Unfortunately, we didn't do that. The naming of the characters in SunnySide was a bit of a mess, but so that's where I would say start is name generators. And then, Myers-Briggs is a great way to do it, because even if we don't even have to talk about like the psychology of if Myers-Briggs is true, because it's kind of a junk science if we're being honest. But it is a great cheat sheet. There's a website called 16 Personalities, and I use the heck out of it. And all you have to do is assign people these different Myers-Briggs personality types. You don't even really have to put a lot of thought into it. There's 16 different types. There's actually 32 if you consider there's aggressive and I forget, there's like different subtypes to each one. So you can get up to 32 different types of personalities. And then you can add another variable, which is male-female. So you can get up to 64 different types of characters just from that one thing. And then once you have that, 16 personalities tells you what their personalities are. It tells you how they'll make decisions about personal relationships, how they'll make decisions at work, issues they might run into, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses might be. And it gives you this little, package of things that you can play with. Another thing that you can use is actually Dungeons & Dragons character creator manuals. Oh, yeah. If you look at, I used what's it called now? The backgrounds. There's like a street urchin or nobleman or
the backgrounds,
it's like these little custom made backgrounds that are supposed to help you create D&D characters. Something that Jim Butcher actually does for all of his characters in the Harry Dresden Files, everybody has a D&D character sheet. And that's how he makes his characters. Okay. Yeah, so that's honestly another route that you can take. You don't even have to making a fantasy game, but it works, and it tells you how smart they are, how resilient they are, how dexterous or quick
these
they might be.
systems are designed inherently to try to help you roleplay them easier. So, it literally has all the tools that you need to write a story, which inherently is roleplaying, but only one-sided, so... Yeah.
And you don't even have to use the fighting mechanics of D&D, but you can kind of use it to inform what their personalities might be.
Yeah.
And the things that they might, do. So MBTI is a good one. Dungeons & Dragons is a good one. Something that I used for SunnySide characters is a very long time ago when I was in high school. I was part of a group online that met and wrote stories together.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, I've never really seen anything like it. It's kind of like LARPing,
Okay.
But it's all in writing only, and we were writing stories. So basically, you'd have a character that you played, and you had this big character information sheet, and it was public to everybody. And I guess it is kind of like D&D in that you only played your character. And so you would write the story that you were telling from your character's perspective. And then if somebody else was in the scene, they would come in and write their character's storylines, whatever.
Okay.
And we would bounce off of each other. So the one that we did was like a Pirates of the Caribbean themed. So like somebody played Jack Sparrow, but then everybody else had our own original characters that we wrote for.
Got it. Okay.
And you would kind of, it was usually a couple paragraphs here and there. It was like on a message board, and you do all this back and forth. And that's honestly where I learned how to write. But the sheets that I used for SunnySide were actually the character sheets that we used for that group. And it was all the important things that you need to know about a character. Their strengths, their weaknesses, different, accessories that made them unique, or different facial features or scars or things that you need to know about the character in order to their background, pets, family relations, all that stuff.
This is the way I sometimes do it when I'm writing a character for a campaign, and I'm unsure how I want to take the character forward. I play them and I roll dice. I set up an encounter. I can see that being Yeah, I set up an encounter and I just play a few skill checks and see how it goes. And then I'm like, okay, that's how it's defined. That's how this character is defined. I actually got an idea from a really good YouTuber about D&D stuff, but there was this other board game. A board game isn't exactly a very good kind of descriptor for it, because it's essentially a book of like stories. Think about D&D's pre-made campaigns without the combat, just pure role play. And it was horror, most of it, right? Anytime you come up to a decision, you can make that decision, but you have to play Jenga. So it comes with Jenga. So as the story continues, it gets harder and harder, because everybody's playing that Jenga by making decisions, and somebody's bound to lose and break the tower. So essentially, what I'm trying to say, it's a really cool one. I'll try to find the name of it. I was watching it on the Will Wheaton's tabletop series that he had on YouTube, and that was one of the ones that he played. But there are so many tools of role-playing tabletop games that just kind of work as well for writers in general. That work really well. Yeah.
But I would say even when you're doing your characters, you don't really fully need to do the world building yet. It depends on
the setting, I suppose?
It depends. If you're doing something that's not high fantasy, you don't really need to worry about the setting.
That's a good point.
Again, something like SunnySide, we didn't really have to worry about, these are just normal people.
You don't have to come up with laws of the physics of the world.
Exactly, But, you take a game like Roller Coaster Tycoon, for example, like we were talking about earlier. The people change depending on how your setting works in that instance, because you need to know what parts of the people and the characters are important to the setting. Same thing with something like unpacking. So it depends on what you're setting up. But what I will say is, if you're going into making a video game and the first thing you're thinking about is mechanics, you need to be thinking about mechanics and world setting and characters all at the same time.
Yeah.
Because they're going to influence each other, and the last thing you want is to be done with the mechanics and then have to shoehorn characters into it. It's not going to make sense. You look at a game like Overwatch. Overwatch works because the characters are part of the mechanics.
Yeah, absolutely. And their story and lore and everything just defines what mechanics to have access to.
Yeah, same thing with Apex Legends.
Yeah.
The story and the characters are literally the characters and the mechanics are literally the same thing. They go together. Same thing with it, back to its most basic form, Tetris.
Yeah.
The mechanics and the character are literally the same thing. So you have to figure out how those are going to play together in whatever game that you're making. But if there's examples too where that doesn't necessarily need to be the case, something like Metroid, the character of Samus, while yes, the things that she can do are dependent on the mechanics of the game, but herself as a character is all just backstory and lore to make the game more interesting, to get you coming back for more. Same thing kind of with Mario, really. The mechanics of the characters don't change too much as far as I know, unless we're talking like Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
But like from Mario to Luigi, the benefit of Luigi is he's taller. That's
yeah. I mean, in the originals especially, yeah, that's pretty much it. Any last words of wisdom before we finish this episode of our podcast?
Actually, yeah, I wanted to talk about just one little thing about how...
Yeah, let's finish with that.
How impactful characters can be. So I wanted you to talk about... You told me that story about this dog in RimWorld.
So we were talking about RimWorld, and yeah, we got to talk about this quickly. RimWorld, if you haven't played it, is a very unique game. It's a role-playing game, kind of RPG-esque kind of situation. You don't control the characters directly. You control the world, and you can build stuff and all that stuff. So you can build shelters for your characters. It is set in a post-apocalyptic world. But what's interesting about it is that there is really no set narrative. There are world building, like there are rules to the world and how it operates. But the narrative is kind of generated and created as you play the game. So through one of my playthroughs, I had a guy. He didn't have a lot, and he finds this dog when I was looking for a new place to settle, and then he decides to take care of this dog, and then he kind of becomes so close, becomes family. And then I was building a bit of a house for him, and then the dog would help him kind of find food easier. And then I remember he got raided. The dog almost died, but then he managed to kill the guy who was going to hurt the dog. And then towards the end of it, like I had another village coming through, and then he decided to join them, like this nomadic people, and then kind of settled down with them in their camp. So this whole story was generated and built as I was playing it. And it was so unique. It's one of the reasons I go back to RimWorld so much when I'm unsure of what to play, because I know it's just going to create a story for me as I play it. And, all in all, to say that you don't have to even have a set narrative. You can put in the tools that the game would create its own story. If you do something like that, you're probably sitting on a golden goose, obviously. Oh, yeah. But that is definitely a unique approach. A lot of work.
That story reminded me of one of the people I would argue is probably one of the best character developers of all time, which is Oda, who's the mangaka for One Piece. Yeah. And One Piece, the reason that manga, the television show, and now Netflix show, the reason that IP is so strong and has been going so hard for so long is the characters. The characters are absolutely beloved by the people who interact with One Piece. I know you're not a One Piece fan.
No, I'm afraid.
But I mean, I've got a whole bunch of One Piece stuff up here. But what reminded me of One Piece was the story about the dog. There's a point very early on in the manga. They don't touch on it as much in the anime, but in the manga, one of the towns that they're in, I'm not going to go into it, but basically this town has been ravaged by a bad guy, and there is a dog in the story. And the dog was the dog for some guy who owned, I think it was like a pet shop or something. And there's this moment where the dog, faces down a bad guy because he's protecting the builder that his owner owned, and he misses him because he died. And it's just a story about a dog, but the way that these stories, it's the stories that we connect with. The reason One Piece is so good is because the stories are well told. They all have deep, interesting, rich backgrounds. And anybody who is into One Piece, when I first started looking at it, I was like, it's about pirates in some weird fictional world. It's the colors, it's very obviously for kids, it's goofy. And then you get into it and you realize, okay, no, this is something that's completely different. And the reason people have become so attached to it is because the characters are so interesting. And I mean, you could say similar things for Dragon Ball Z. People love Goku, they love Vegeta because the characters are so good. You could say a lot of anime people become attached to because the characters are so good. So, what I would say is the last bit of wisdom is when you're going to make your game, don't think of it as a get rich quick scheme. Don't think of it as I just want to make a game that I want to play. Don't think of it as, you know, a technical demo or I just want to see if I can make this work. It's art. At its core, it's art. Whether the art is the story, the characters, the actual art, the 3D art, even the UI, even the mechanics that you put together are artistic. You have to tap into that part of yourself and be creative and enjoy the artistic expression of creating what you're creating. And that's how you're going to make a good game.
Yeah.
Really.
I mean, couldn't have put it better myself. And we end on that high note. Thank you so much for listening to us. We release these episodes on the full extended versions. But if you would like to hear the extended versions of our State of the Industry episodes, you can support us down below on Patreon, and you also get all of the episodes State of the Industry or How to Indie on Mondays, so that's earlier than Tuesday and than Thursday that it would be publicly released. And you will support us directly for SunnySide and whatever game that we work on in the future. So thank you so much for your consideration. We will see you next week on the State of the Industry. Bye.
Bye.